So we are studying the part of the Haggadah that's called the Ma'aseh of Rabbi Elazar, the story of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So this is the story of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Says, I was like 70 years old. And so let's just go into an introduction. That this passage is like the previous one and continues this discussion of the greatness of the obligation or the importance of the obligation to tell the Exodus story. And it comes to explain also the obligation to mention it on all the nights, even though the mitzvah on every day is different than the mitzvah on the night of Pesach. The Rambam has a different version of this text. His version is that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said to them, Amar lahem, means to say that it's a continuation, that he was sitting with them and speaking to the previous paragraph where we talked about these 5 rabbis who were speaking. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said to them, so he was there. Okay, so Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, basically, Harei ani ben shivim shana. He says, when I was appointed the Nasi, the president of the academy, I was 18 years old, but it was like I was 70 years old. It was like I was 70. Harei ani ben shivim shana. The Gemara is in Brachos 28a, and there it talks about how that he was afraid to be appointed because he was too young. He said he looks too young. So overnight he grew white hair. And white is a sign, we had in today's Daf Yomi that Avram prayed for old age. Means Avram prayed for white hair. So white, hello Nace, come on in. So white is a sign of clarity and purity. So maybe when Avram prayed for Zikna, he was really praying for wisdom. Take the Haggadah we're doing here. She comes next to me, Nace. We're doing the passage that talks about how talking about the custom, the practice of the idea that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was the passage of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, I was like I was 70. And I didn't merit that they should say the Exodus story at nights. So he grew this white hair. What does it mean, lo zachiti? I didn't merit. It means I wasn't able to understand, or I wasn't able to defeat the sages in this matter. He had a dispute. Basically, I wasn't able to convince the rabbis that they had to talk about the passage of Tzitzis, which talks about the Exodus, that they also have to say that passage at night, which is the 3rd paragraph of Shema. I wasn't able to convince them of that. That's how Rashi understands this. And that's basically what the discussion here is about. Until Ben Zoma came along and made this practice, and he taught them, in order to remember the day of your Exodus, that's called Yemei Chayecha, all the days of your life. Yemei Chayecha Yamim, the days of your life is the days, called Yemei Chayecha Zalelos. That includes the nights. And so therefore we see from here that you have to recite the passage of Shema, the 3rd paragraph, also every night. That's this world, all the days of your life. Mashiach is to include the days of the Mashiach. And also we're obligated to talk about the Exodus in the days of the Mashiach. Well, what will be the point? So why do we have to talk about, first of all, before there's so many parts of this teaching, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah are interesting, but first to say, why do we have to talk about it in the Mashiach? We've been redeemed again. You don't talk about the earlier redemption once we had a later redemption. Why are we talking about the Exodus once we've been redeemed? Yeah, nace.
It's also a similar term to from the holidays.
Very nice. Yeah, Purim will celebrate. But here we're saying that we're also celebrating Pesach because we have to talk about it because it's a redemption. So even though we'll have another redemption, we can never stop talking about the earlier redemption. Interesting. Okay, so this is this paragraph. So let's see what some of the commentary on this paragraph is. Hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so what does this paragraph say? As the following. Let's look at the commentary. So Amar R Elazar ben Azariah. So why is this here? Why is this passage here? Because so the Kolbo, who's the Kolbo? Who's the 14th century commentary in Provence? He says the reason why this is brought here is so that you don't say that you need to mention the Exodus only during the day, because it says Aman Tiskor as Yom, but not at night, because we don't find that at night. Hold on. We don't find at night that there's an obligation. And so therefore it's to teach us that you have to talk about it at night, which is so ironic because we're gathered at night. That so therefore the Rashbats explains that to teach us that the obligation of the Exodus story is not only on the night of Pesach, but it's every single night. Every single night. Now if you go back to that story, if you go back to the previous story, it never says that the previous story took place on Pesach. It says, "Ma'aser Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon, Shayim Mesubim b'nei Brach." But it never says that it was Pesach. It could have been any night. It never says it was Pesach. So just pointing that out. Okay. So why? So another question is, why does it have to mention I was 70? Why is that relevant? Yeah, but that's fine. There was a story where he grew the white hair overnight. But why is that relevant to this teaching? Arei ben shivim shana. But why is that relevant? Why did it say I was 70 and then I never merited to have the Exodus at night? So what's the connection? So the Ein Eliyahu, this commentary to Brachos, explains that he goes into this discussion, which is not the most convincing to me. But I guess he's trying to explain the basic question is that why should we listen to him? You can't teach halacha if you're too young. So he says, even though I was 18, it was like I was older, so therefore I have the right to teach us halacha to the rabbis. Because we're talking about the passage of reciting the Shema at night. So what was his actual age then when he said he was 70? So Rashi says that he was 18 years old. And that's what Rashi says in the Gemara in Brachos, that he was 18, and since they wanted to appoint him to be the head of the academy, he grew the white hair overnight. A miracle happened. And that was when this drasha took place. But the Jerusalem Talmud says that it means to say it's something else. He really was old. The Jerusalem Talmud says, but he was very old at this time. He wasn't young. The Jerusalem Talmud writes that even though when you become the prince or the president, it typically shortens your life, he was very old, and so therefore he was close to 70. Totally different explanation. You ever hear that one before, Nace? That's from the Yerushalmi. And so the Rambam says a similar thing. He says because he studied Torah so hard, That's why he felt he was like 70, because he was studying Torah so hard, so it strained his strength. So, okay, what's the deeper argument about whether or not we should be mentioning the Exodus at night? What's the deeper idea here? So I think that the nighttime is like the quintessential symbol of exile. So the question is, while we're in darkness, if we should be talking about the Exodus story. So he says yes. So okay, there's a whole. Why does he use the expression of lo zachiti? I didn't merit. So why did he say lo zachiti? So one explanation is he was obviously so smart that that's the reason why they appointed him to be the Nasi, even though he's so young. So you would expect him to know all the answers. But he's saying he didn't know this basic answer. Okay. Well, let's talk about Ben Zoma a little bit. Ben Zoma is the one who's always fascinated me about this story. Darsha Ben Zoma. Ben Zoma is the one who's the source for this idea that we have to mention the story of the Exodus at night. So who is Ben Zoma? So Rashi says, why is he called Ben Zoma? Why is he called the son of Zoma? So Rashi says that since Ben Zoma did not live a long life, because we know in the Gemara Haggadah that there are four who entered into a paradise to engage in mysticism. Who are these four? Rabbi Akiva was one of them, and Ben Azai. So Rabbi Akiva went in, b'shalom, nichnas b'shalom, v'yatza b'shalom. He went in peace, and he exited in peace. Achar was Kotzitz ben Etios. Elisha ben Aviwa, he was Kotzitz ben Etuos. Ben Zoma and Ben Azai, there's two versions, one the Bavli and one the Yerushalmi. According to the Bavli, Ben Zoma looked at mystical ideas and he became insane. Whereas Ben Azai looked at it and he died. Whereas the Yerushalmi Talmud reverses it. So Rashi says because he didn't live a long life, therefore he never got ordination, they called him after his father. So they only called him after his father. It's so interesting that the person who's the source of our Seder night's teaching is Ben Zoma, who, according to this version, studied what he wasn't supposed to, went insane, and he's only called after his father.
But I think I don't know that I don't know if the last Ben Zoma.
Well, there are the different versions of it.
In the Gemara, it talks about how one of them is like a genius at making weird brushes. So it could be like he's like the king of making these
Drushes. That's why he's the one. So that's a very nice point, Mace. Now Barbanel says that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was saying, and even though Ben Zoma was younger than him, nevertheless he was able to teach him this idea. I just think it's fascinating that Ben Zoma is the one who teaches us we have to expound it at night, where he is the one who went insane from or died from studying things he wasn't supposed to. The Midrash Shmuel writes in the name of Rabbi Ephraim that there were four people whose names were Shimon. Shimon ben Zoma, Shimon ben Azai, Shimon ben Nanas, and Shimon HaTeimani. And so we didn't want to confuse them. We only called them by their last name. Never heard that one either. And we learned in Sota, very good, Nace. Nace, so sharp, so wonderful. The Gemara in Sota tells us, the last daf of Sota, daf Mem Tes, Misha Meis ben Zoma, when Ben Zoma dies, Batlu HaDarshanim. The Darshanim, those who expound the Torah, ceased. That's what Nace was saying. And Rashi explains that it's because he was an expert in all the reasons of the Bible. Now, this is why he's the one who gave this drasha, Achadarsha ben Zoma. He was the one who knew how to give drashos. Okay, what is the obligation what's the obligation of remembering the Exodus? How do we do it? So the way you do it is through the paragraph, according to Tosefta, through the paragraph of Vayatziv Nachal. According to Rebbe, you need to mention it. You have to mention that God is the king. And others say you just have to mention the plague of the firstborn. Okay. Now, what about the opinion of the sages? The sages say Yemei Chayacha Zolam Hazeh and Kol Yemei Chayacha Avi Yemos HaMashiach. So what is the reasoning that you have to add the days of the Mashiach? That's something that's always fascinated me. So Tosfos Rabbi Akiva Eger says, why did they say Kol Yemei Chayacha Yemos HaMashiach? Why don't they say it shorter? Kol Yemei Chayacha Yemos HaMashiach. Why do they have to say Lahavi? Because Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says Kol Yemei Chayacha Halelos. And here the Chacham saying Kol Yemei Chayacha Lahavi Kol Lahavi Yemos HaMashiach. They add extra words. And so that's a very precise point. He's picking up on it. And he explains that the mention of Yetzias Mitzrayim during the days of Mashiach is secondary to the mentioning of the redemption from servitude. And so therefore, Lahavi, meaning to tell us that we have to mention it, but it's not as significant as it is now. The main significance is that we were redeemed for the Mashiach. So it's secondary. That's what Rabbi Akiva Eger says. The Brisker Rav, says that according to the Chachamim, the mitzvah to mention the Mashiach is the same mitzvah in this world. And that's why they say Lahavi. It's the exact same mitzvah in the time of the Mashiach. According to Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, the mitzvah at night is an additional mitzvah. And so therefore it says Halelos. So according to the grids, it's the same mitzvah that exists now, but according to Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, there's an additional mitzvah. And I think it's something even deeper. This is the idea, I think. This is Rabbi Yosef, what I think. Even in the days of the Mashiach, we have to remember the Exodus. Why? It's a fundamental point that even in the days of the Mashiach, we can't stop trying to improve ourselves spiritually. That in the days of the Mashiach, we'll be longing for an even greater redemption. An even greater redemption. Well, the Mashiach is not the end of our spiritual growth. And that's why we might have thought, okay, what's the reason why we remember the Exodus? Because it's so essential to our spiritual growth. When it's saying it's not that. It's just the beginning. It's just the beginning of where we're able to see things with clarity. Follow that, Nace? You follow what I'm saying?
The end of the last sentence is Vehevianu lebeit bechira. The Lavi is very central, like you just said. But I was going to ask, we have the brachot before Kriyat Shema, but if there's a special mitzvah at night, according to him, wouldn't there be another bracha, birkat mitzvot, like specifically?
Well, we don't say bracha on it during the day anyway. I mean, these are not types of mitzvahs that you say a bracha on.
No, but he's telling us that there's a special mitzvah to remember it at night. Everything is Zachar Yetziat Mitzrayim. So I'm just wondering if maybe, don't know. On the tefillin we say the mitzvah, right? Because
on tefillin we do, but But there are mitzvahs.
Because it is the Zechirat, it's a mitzvah, the Yad Chazakah and the head, right? So so I'm just asking if maybe if he's saying that we have to add another one, and we don't
That's
say
why I said
the bracha on tzitzis at night.
That's why I said that we cited the opinion of Rabbi Akiva Eger says that's emes v'yatziv. When you say that, that's how we remember it. Very nice. A very good point. What about according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? Well, how you doing? Is that Noe? Oh, no, it's Donnie. Amazing. Come on in, Donnie. So according to, I love it that you're here. Here, grab Haggadah.
I didn't have time to stop home, so I'm a little bit like.
No, we like that.
Like a bum.
No, you're not dressed like a bum. You're dressed like a tzaddik.
A little bummy, but it's just.
Yeah, Larry, we're studying the Haggadah if you want to join us. So, what?
See? Nah, he said it was like.
Moshe's coming. Moshe drove you, right?
I drove Moshe.
Oh, you drove Moshe.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fine.
Nah, he asked if you drove the team.
Donnie drove Moshe.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't even know you had a car.
Today I did.
Baruch Hashem. Okay, so according to Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, Larry, according to Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, in the time of the Mashiach, well, you have to mention the mitzvah of the Exodus. The Chachamim say you do, but what about Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah? So the Haggadah is not explicit about that. So so according to Rebbe Avram Chadida, he says, even according to Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, you have to mention it because the world in the Messianic era will not change at all. So if that's the case, according to Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, it includes also the nights, in addition to the Mashiach. So if that's the case, why would we think we don't have to mention the Exodus? If the world is not going to change, why would we think we don't have to mention it? This is the fundamental point. Okay, this is the fundamental teaching. I want to review. The rabbis say that the words Kol Yemei Chayecha, you have to mention the Exodus, all the days of your life, comes to include the Mashiach. The days of the Mashiach, we also have to tell the Exodus story. Why would we think you don't have to do it then? Why do we need a special teaching to remind us of that? So we have to say, it's human nature is when you get a bigger redemption, you forget about something earlier. Human nature is to forget about things, to forget about the places we were where we have gratitude to God. And this is reminding us that that's not the case. That no matter how many steps of achievement, I'm sitting with Larry and Eliezer are a little bit older than these boys here, and these boys are representing the future of the Jewish people, and are going to make a lot of great accomplishments. But you never forget the people who helped you along the way. You never forget the earlier redemptions that you had, and that's the message. That's the message. Okay. Okay. Oh, so now, Rabbi Yosef, I have your question here. How come we don't make a blessing on the mentioning of the Exodus story? This is literally the question Rabbi Yosef asked. So the Meiri writes, the Meiri brings down Rabbi Yosef's question. Rabbi Yosef, why don't we make a special blessing? Hashem al mitzvahs Yitzias Mitzrayim, al mitzvahs Haskaras Yitzias Mitzrayim. So he says, why don't we say this? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haasher kadishanu v'tzivanu la'haskiras Yitzias Mitzrayim. And also, we should make a prayer on the mitzvah on Shema and the Amidah before a person prays. And so the Meiri answers that on the Kriya Shema, there were 2 blessings before it, and they exempt us from having to make the bracha on the Shema. And why do we not make the blessing on Yitzias Mitzrayim and the Amidah? So the Meiri writes that they're blessings on their own. Not sure what that means, but I guess the tefillah is a blessing on its own, so you don't make a blessing on a blessing. Hello, Elon, how you doing?
Amazing. Amazing. Okay, so I guess they're raising your question. They're raising your question, Rabbi Yosef. I don't know that they answered it satisfactorily, but they raised it. Okay, so now the question is, if in the time of the Exodus, will in the time of the Messianic era, will the mitzvah of Exodus be erased? So the Gemara asked this question, and this is based upon the prophet Jeremiah. It says in the prophet of Jeremiah, Hinei yamim ba'im, behold, the days are coming, says God, V'lo yomru od chai Hashem, and they will no longer say, long live God, Asher Ha'elah, as B'nai Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. So the prophet Jeremiah says it explicitly. There will come a time where the people will no longer say, long live God who led the children of Israel out of Egypt. It says explicitly in Jeremiah that there will come a day where we will no longer remember, we will no longer say, long live the God who led us out of Egypt, but it will just say, long live the God who saved us from the troubles of the north. Today it's Hezbollah, in those days it was the Babylonians. So why do we say we have to mention the Exodus story in the Messianic era when Jeremiah says we're not going to do it? A Gavaldik Kasha. You hear the question? You could throw this out at your Seder, put this question out there, and everybody's going to think, wow, you're yeshiva bachers. Wow. You follow the question? What's the question? Repeat it over, Donnie. Okay, you want to repeat it?
I think Moshe.
Moshe? Nace?
Yeah, so we have.
Oh, good, go.
You said that we're going to still in the midst of remembering Yetziat Mitzrayim in the times of Mashiach. Right, but we have this explicit pasuk in Yirmiyahu that says that we're going to stop remembering the mitzvah of Yetziat Mitzrayim and talk about the Babylonians up north.
Yeah, it's Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 7. Beautiful, Nace. Say it again. Say it to them. Say the question again, Nace.
It says it in Jeremiah, so why?
It says in Jeremiah. What does it say in Jeremiah?
We won't remember Yetziat Mitzrayim anymore. We'll talk about the Babylonians, but then we say, no, in the times of Mashiach, we'll still be talking about Yetziat Mitzrayim.
So why does Haggadah say we're going to talk about the time of Mashiach when Jeremiah says we won't? And furthermore, in the Pirush Haggadah for the Rashba, he says that someone would take Ben Zoma's position and say, since Ben Zoma says that we're not going to mention Mashiach not going to mention the Exodus time of the Mashiach, if that's the case, all the mitzvahs that Jewish people are commanded to mention Egypt will not be applicable in the time of the Mashiach. So the Rashba answers, anyway, he gets into it, but that's something that we have to think about. The answer to the Jeremiah question, the answer to the Jeremiah question is something we have to maybe pick up on Sunday or Shabbos. We'll have extra time to study on Shabbos. Okay, so we'll stop here to daven mincha at this time. Yashar koach to everyone. Shkoyach.